This now, President Cyril Ramaphosa admits that load shedding has had a negative impact on the country's economy. He was speaking during the State of the Nation address in Parliament yesterday. Ramaphosa says a government will focus on fixing the fundamentals and growing the economy. But haven't we heard this before? Well, for some reaction to the President's speech, economist Azza Jammine joins us in studio. Dr. Jammine, thank you very much for your time.
Good morning to you.
Were you impressed by the President last night?
I was actually impressed by the President. Whether or not we will see concrete action being taken in response to the State of the Nation address is what everyone is.
What's your sense around the energy problems?
On the energy side, I think there is some encouraging movement. The idea of allowing municipalities to negotiate directly with IPPs to access energy is certainly a step in the movement of freeing up the space through which there could be less pressure on Eskom itself to deliver. And the other facet that he's basically endorsed, which we've known about for a few days now, is that Eskom intends to go ahead with load shedding on a fairly consistent basis over the next 18 months.
How's that going to affect the economy, you think?
If it does so in the way that it was doing in the last few days, with a lot of warning to people.
Yeah, that element of predictability.
Correct.
Is what
and if they can encourage people to somehow find an easy way of accessing their schedule, the impact will be less severe than might otherwise have been the case. And by doing so, they will just free up time to do some maintenance work, which they previously haven't been doing.
Let's stick with Eskom for a little bit. Yesterday, the power utility coming out with a proposal of severance packages to managers. You've just heard my conversation with Sigonati Manjanja there. First of all, are they testing the ground for whether or not there are managers who could possibly take these up, and how likely are these to find favor with the people concerned? But also importantly, the question I asked Mr. Manjanja, are they postponing the inevitable?
I think it's, the answer to both those questions is yes. I think they are testing the water with managers. I'm not convinced, however, that the excess supply of people at Eskom necessarily applies only to the management cadre. I think you may well find that it permeates the entire organisation, and in so doing it may simply be postponing the inevitable. And we just can't get away from it, unfortunately, if we want to right-size a lot of these state-owned enterprises in order to make them more financially viable. There has to be a little bit of some job losses, which would basically claw back on creating disguised creating employment opportunities for people who would otherwise have been unemployed.
The other element I would like to touch on is the response from the Minerals Council last night. I think their statement was pushed out at around 10. That tells you just how pensive they are, watching perhaps the President and listening to his every word. They appear to be supportive of what he said. I think in particular they are galvanized by the self-generation element that came out of that speech. Do you think that's likely now to stabilize things in the mining sector? There have been lots of talk of retrenchments there.
The fact is that if the government were to implement actually everything that the President spoke about yesterday, I think it would enable the economy to make progress, and especially in the mining sphere. But the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. Will we actually see these issues being implemented? The President was very astute at sidestepping away from the pushback that he's receiving from many within the ruling party, and especially the trade unions and some of the people opposed to him. Are we going to see us escaping from that pushback that will, of necessity, halt the implementation of many of these measures?
Yeah. Very interesting indeed, as you say, pushing back against some of the ANC's alliance partners. The economic reforms, I've never heard him so clear on it, that they're actually going to be implemented. The Didomboweni economic reforms, or should we say Treasury's economic reforms, to be precise. The one element, though, Dr. Jamin, that is quite key, youth unemployment. That's a ticking time bomb.
You know, as much as the government can put various schemes in place to try and assist in alleviating youth unemployment, you're not going to do so until such time as certain labour laws are amended, and until such time as we start seeing really positive and constructive and appropriate outcomes from our educational system. At the moment, there are far too many young people who are qualifying and are just unsuitable for the labour market because they are not qualified to be able to do the work that the real sector, especially the private sector, actually requires. And secondly, there is a kind of a cultural opposition to wanting to do what is difficult to do in education, and that is study mathematics and science in a proper way, to be able to think cognitively, to be able to sort out the kind of problems that are needed in the technological advancing economy that we have now.
Azar Jamin, thank you very much for making the time to talk to us this morning.